Hey guys, it's River. I was invited to join a post-apocalyptic Christmas collab and work alongside a ton of amazing artists, including Telle y Dolls, Jackyohhh, Enchanterium, hisnameisAkin, SefChol Creations, ValKity's World, Kyros Workshop, and BlankSpaceDolls. The character I designed is an elf vendor who sells trinkets and, maybe bits of food, and is a total Scrooge, and during Christmas time sells toys, maybe cookies, or who knows what she's got in her wagon. I don't know what's in there.
I would like to thank my friend Celeste at cinder.317 on Instagram for literally giving me a kick in the right direction.
Using my 2-part epoxy sculpting medium, I sculpted elf ears, and if I do bigger ears, I do use wire usually, but since these are smaller, I didn't bother. I actually end up using super glue when I do ears this small, and they stay on pretty well. Her factory face, I noticed that she had a hole in her mouth, which I decided to just ignore for right now, and I'll fix it later. And then I went ahead and painted the scalp, and since it was a darker color, I didn't bother removing the original paint. And, then I turned her into a lollipop, so yeah. While the lollipop was drying, I went ahead and started preparing for my favorite part of the face-up, the reroot. Ooh, so fun. No, actually I hate it, I was lying. The way I do my parts with yarn is I actually have 2 pieces in the same hole, and then I crosswise them just like you do with your regular nylon, or insert whatever fiber you like to use best, and yada yada, and you get the idea. Anyway, after that, you get the endless brushing and straightening, and I did like a soft style because she's gonna go in a wrap, so I didn't want to completely finish her hair, but I did go ahead and hairspray the braids because I didn't want those to get fuzzy. Okay, now I'm going to deal with that little problem I was ignoring. So apparently this is how she comes from the factory, but I didn't realize that before I started working on her. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in that little hole with a little bit of epoxy sculpt and smooth that a little bit. I think it turned out okay. I mixed up a gray color that was similar to her skin tone. Well, it was close enough anyway. And I painted in the hole that I filled and her ears. And then after all of that, I decided I didn't like her feet. So I get to deal with that now. To make it a little bit easier and safer, I started the holes with my X-Acto knife, and I used my pliers to hold the pieces while I drilled, and then I twisted up some copper wire and used my epoxy cement to set the copper into the plastic. The epoxy 24 hours to cure, and then I mixed up a little bit of epoxy sculpt and filled in the spaces in between the pieces that I used. Then I waited another 24 hours and started whittling away at the excess, and I used my sandpaper to smooth it out a little bit. Be really careful if you do this. You can see the difference between the whittled and sanded one versus the one that's still kind of raw and bulky. And later I painted them, and honestly, it didn't look as good as before, but I figured they were going to be covered in boots, so it wasn't a big deal.
Here I am working on the skirt. I usually fray check all of my cotton edges, but I wanted the bottom edge of the skirt to be really frayed and mangled and beat up and dingy, so I didn't put fray check on the very bottom edge. But I did sew these 2 pieces together as one piece into the waistband. That way there would be less bulk on the doll.
here I am just checking to make sure that I caught all of the gathers and that there's no puckers, and yay, no problem, so that's great. Anyways, look at this awesome small tabletop vintage ironing board that my friend gave me. I'm obsessed. I love it. Anyway, I use this tiny little iron to go ahead and press the fold into the top of the waistband, and then I do like a 1/8 inch fold over there, and then I fold that in half, and I'm gonna go ahead and hand stitch it. That way I don't see stitches on the right side of the fabric. Also, that cute unicorn pin cushion you see in the background there was made by my friend Amanda at Patrikios Customs. Check her out on Instagram. Love you, girl. Anyway, this skirt was way too clean for my original design, so I had to kill another little piece of my soul again and basically mangle it within an inch of its life. I mean, it got really violent here, so. Traumatizing experience, I also decided that it needed to have some dirt and mud on it and splatter, and you get the idea. So I mixed up a nice brown, and it was actually a little too brilliant, so I had a little bit of black to it to dull it a little, and it was just a nice earthy neutral brown. I then had to sneakily borrow my toddler's paintbrushes, and well, it'll be interesting. So this sponge brush I thought would make good, like, round in dirt that had been there a while, so I just kind of went crazy with that one. Brush I then used because I thought it would look like splatter, like more fresh looking mud that, I don't know, maybe she stomped in a puddle or something and got it everywhere. You get the idea. Bristle brush I used to put in like intentional smudges, like she slipped or she brushed up against something, and you know, maybe the dirt is a little bit more grounded up there. You get the idea. Basically, variation in texture is visually interesting, so I tried to use different brushes and different smudge patterns to kind of give it like grungy. Anyway, I put the brown paint on the skirt. To the boots. Actually, I tried this pattern on a Monster High doll whose feet hadn't been mangled by me, and it fit fine. It fits the regular Monster High Never After High dolls, no problem. So, this pattern is available in my Etsy shop, which I will link in the description below. Yay! This is actually goat skin from my bookbinding days in college because I didn't want to go out and buy new plastic leather. You can go out and buy synthetic leather, no problem, but I already had this. So I'm using a beveling knife to make the height thinner on the suede side. And then I carefully trace my pattern pieces with ink pen, and make sure when you do the sole, you do one of the left and one of the right, and keep track of which one is which. wrong sides together, I start at the center front and work towards the back and leave the last 1/8 inch off. I do that for both sides on each foot. And then I cut my faux fur pieces and sew a small anchoring stitch through the fur into the shoe and tie it off on the inside. And then I match the edge of the faux fur to the back edge of the shoe, and I just do a few little stitches to anchor the back of the fur to the back of the shoe. And it doesn't even have like a sewn up closure or anything. You just fold one half of the boot over the other and use a thread or a ribbon to wrap and tie the shoe to your doll, just like that. Here I'm just making 2 little simple bracers out of a scrap piece of the hide that I had. Here I am working on the cloak, and I did end up tearing up the very bottom edge a little bit. And to keep the knit from stretching, I did a tiny little back and forth running stitch just to keep it from stretching. I wasn't quite sure how I wanted the cloak closure to be. I didn't feel like a tie through the casing would be good. I put a pin in there. I put a pin in it. We'll get back to that later. Compared to the skirt, the cloak was still too clean, so I went ahead and got out the paint that I had saved and my toddler brushes again and dingified it so it matched. This part of her outfit I am calling the bell bandolier, but I didn't have red leather, so I went ahead and used another piece of my goat hide and painted it red, which that hurt my soul a little bit, but I got over it. Anyway, I went in some red highlights, and I found these silver bells. Silver bells, that's funny. Anyway, they were just a little bit too shiny for the dinginess of my character, so I mixed up some bluish gray color and used a paper towel that I'd been using to dab off my paintbrushes and kind of made it, tarnished looking. So it fit in better with the character. My dad to 3D print some deer skulls for me, and then I remembered that the heads of these dolls are not proportionately 1/6 scale, so we doubled the size and it worked out much better. These were the smoothest antlers out of the ones that I was given, and the backs of them were a little bit funky, so I just filled those in with 2-part epoxy sculpt, which I let cure, and then I sanded it, and then I used filler sandable primer to spray everything like 5 or 6 times. Anyways, a lot of layers, like really thin coats. After priming, I turned everything into a lollipop because everything in this project is a lollipop, and I gave everything a couple coats of white paint. Then gave everything about, I think it was 3 coats of this bone color, and I filled in the eye sockets and the nasal cavity with a dark gray, and then I mixed up this muddy reddish color and did a wash, which is where you really water it down and put it on whatever your project is, and then you wipe off some of the paint, or you can really, really water it down and just do it with a paintbrush, but this way is more fun in my opinion. I used chopped off pieces of toothpicks to sort of be stabilizers between the skull and the antlers, and I used my 2-part epoxy cement again to set the antlers onto the skull, and I let that cure for 24 hours. It turned out awesome. In layer 1, I work in some basic guidelines for the face. So I'm getting the eye shapes in, I'm getting the shapes of the eyebrow in, I'm doing some basic blushing with like an olive drab and a claret color. I'm also getting the tips of her ears along with her face kind of blotchy because I figure it's cold outside. So I'm also getting some color in the eye space. I like to use General's white chalk pastels for the whites of the eyes and for a lot of the highlighting. I also decided to give her a little bit of an eyebrow scar. And for her lip color, I decided on a dark bluish, tealish color to kind of balance the face because the face was so warm. You need a little bit of cold to cut through that. I focus on the shading and start to bring in some of the finer details, and I'm really starting to contour the face a little bit. I wanted my doll to have really nice, rich, dark brown eyes, but my brown pencil was just not doing it for me. So I actually had to come in with black pastel pigment to darken that up and give it a nice, rich color. Starting to work on the finer details of the face. I want to bring the corners of the mouth up, so I'm drawing outside of the mold is the term, just to give her a little bit of a mischievous smile. And I do end up putting in some little tiny dimples on either side of her mouth. I like to make the eyes really dark up underneath the lid and then highlight them more towards the bottom of the eye to give it like a three-dimensional look. Layer 3 is also where I start to draw in the pupils, and I have been asked how I get my dolls to look straight at me every single time, and I don't know, I've just never struggled with this, but a tip that I can give is that I like to stop and kind of put one finger or my hand on one side of the doll's face and then switch to the other side, and I switch back and forth so that I'm not necessarily looking at the whole face, but I'm kind of comparing one side of the face to the other to make sure that they're mirrored. And that helps me. And I actually do that several times while I'm working on the doll, but I figure nobody wants to see that, so this time I tried to include it, and there you can see that I'm doing it there, and I did that a few more times, and that just really helps me to make the pupils both look at me. The last thing I do before sealing is I take my tiniest paintbrush and using my white watercolor pencil, I paint in these tiny little micro crescents underneath the pupils, and I've been doing this with every doll since March. I just love it. I think it's really become a part of my signature style. I think these are the tiniest doll eyes I have ever drawn, so I didn't want to go overboard with the eye shines, and I just put, again, really simple, easy, one dot in each eye. That's easy for me, and I can place them easily and make them mirrored so they match, and yeah. Recently switched gloss. I use this Tamiya Color Acrylic Paint X22 Clear now, and the reason I like it is because I haven't had a problem with stickiness at all, and I use that to gloss my lips. This bodysuit was made using a Requiem Art pattern. She has an Etsy shop, she has an Instagram, give her a follow. While I was shopping at Joann Fabrics, I found these brass-colored jump rings and matching head pins and figured out how to close the cloak on my doll. So, using a jump ring and a head pin, and I actually had to use my pliers on my cloak because it was 4 layers instead of 2, but we're just gonna pretend. So, you put the jump ring on the fabric and then push the pin through, bringing the tip of the pin back through the jump ring like that, and that is how that works, and it is beautiful. You're welcome. Then, a million years later, I was able to finish styling my doll's hair. Yay! Woo! Finally! After finishing my doll's hair, I tried to make the deer's skull removable while sitting atop my doll's head, but it wasn't going to happen, so I ended up using Fabri-Tac glue to glue it directly to the head. I found these tiny little LED Christmas light packs on Amazon, and I thought, ooh, yeah. Also, excuse my penguin pajamas, this project took a lot of late nights. I could have been finished, I could have called it done, I could have completed the project right then and there, but always be extra. So I went ahead and decided to build the little wagon that I designed using balsa wood, copper tooling, and the tips of head pins to be the nails. I designed these wagon wheels on an app that I didn't like, so I'm not even going to talk about it, but using these 3D printed wheels, some hardwood dowel rods, and the tips off of toothpicks, I drilled holes through the dowel rods and used that to hold the wheels onto the wagon. I then set about murdering these popsicle sticks. After the mass mayhem that had become my desk, I painted the wood to look like different types of reclaimed wood, white picket fence, barn, who knows where the wood came from. And then I used sandpaper to scratch off some of the wood to make it a little bit more worn looking. For these long brace boards, my popsicle sticks were not long enough, so I ended up using balsa wood again, and I drove some of those head pin faux nails in and glued them on kind of haphazardly to kind of make it look like maybe she's not so great at carpentry. I did end up priming, painting, and doing a wash on the wagon wheels much like I did the skull, and to keep the wagon wheels from rubbing against the wagon, I glued little tiny brown pieces of felt onto the back of the center of the wheels. now I need to put a little bit extra in my little bit extra. So using polymer clay, I make sort of like a schlumped eggplant shape because I'm making this teddy bear and his belly is like floppy floppy, saggy saggy, right? And I use a toothpick to put the texture on. I shove part of a toothpick down into the body so that the head won't flop off because I have a tendency to drop things and they break. Again, I use a toothpick to add texture, and then I kind of make like an elongated eggplant shape for the arms and the legs, and you get the idea. To make the ears of the teddy bear, I roll out a little tiny snake, and then I make the ends match and kind of curl it into a fat teardrop shape. And use my toothpick to mash the middle into the center, and it kind of sticks on, and then as I add the texture to the ear, that adheres the ear to the rest of the head. Okay, after Teddy's baked and less mushy, he needs eyes, so I use a real itty bitty tiny button, which I pull thread through to kind of look like it's sewn on, and then I glue that onto the head, and then I use embroidery floss for the other eye just to make like a little X, and then at the last minute I decided that his foot pads needed to be a lighter color, and painted those on, and finally, Teddy is done. Oh, I sculpted this really ugly horse out of two-part epoxy sculpt and then carved on it, so it was kind of like whittled looking, you know, and I painted it this nice taupe color and did a gray wash on it, and then using embroidery floss and Fabri-Tac, I glue on some hair, and then we've got a little horse. Yay, little bitty toys. Using balsa wood and similar techniques to how I made the wagon, I made this little crate to just kind of sit inside the wagon to kind of give it a more full look. Saved these cookies from, I don't know, a million years ago when I was making my Greta Appenzeller doll for Candyland Swap. I love gingerbread cookies and I can't get rid of these, and I don't know where this tiny basket came from, but hey, this works. So save all your little bits, people. At the last second, I realized she needed a weapon in a dangerous wasteland, so I actually found a, quote, that gun, quote, from the game Fallout New Vegas, which is actually one of my favorite Fallout games, on Thingiverse, so I'll put that link in the description below. Finally done! I decided to name her Ren. Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow me on Instagram, subscribe to my channel, like this video, and be sure to check out everyone else's videos from the collab. Check out my links to my Etsy shop, and as always, your love and support means the world to me. I really appreciate you guys. Merry Christmas. See you in the Dollverse.